All right, when we talk about America's finest city and the American dream, we've got to dive into the real estate environment. Joining us in studio, one of the best in the business, A.J. Powers. Good to have you on the show, man.
Thanks, Greg.
And also, first-time guest, Rosser Pettit with the law offices of Rosser Pettit. You specialize in probate, so you're an attorney.
Yes, I am.
So we'll talk a little bit about the market, and we'll get into some niche advice because I know this is big. You work with a lot of these cases. So start with me about the real estate market. How are we doing? We're about past halfway of the year.
Yeah.
What do we got?
Not a lot's changing right now in my mind. I think the market's staying pretty consistent throughout, whether it be interest rates or inventory. Not much is changing right now. I expect that as we get into October, November, we'll see a little slowdown as normal. People don't want to move as much during the holidays, but typically our market's about 25% every quarter. It's not broken up like most markets that are seasonal, so I don't see too many things changing unless something happens in the economy.
Tell us about what you're seeing, because you do a lot of high-end stuff.
Right.
What's the difference between that $500,000 home and that $1.5 million home?
I think it just comes down to buyer pool. People that are buying a $500,000 home, it's their first home, they don't have a ton of options. 500, if you get into 7 or 8, there's a lot of options out there, but 500, you're pretty limited. So when something comes on the market, you got to jump at it.
Yep.
1.5 plus, you've got a lot of inventory to choose from. So,
interesting.
You've got markets like Carlsbad and Sanitas where that gets you a real nice home, or you can move down to La Jolla where you barely get into it.
Exactly.
So I think it comes down to the number of people that can afford it and the number of options that are out there.
Let's dive into some niche advice here. So in every market, there's different types of scenarios, from people being underwater, death, debt, discharge. They call it the D's of real estate. When we talk about probate, we're talking about a death situation, a legal situation. So Ross, you specialize in this. You want to explain what a probate is as it pertains to real estate?
So probate is a transfer of a decedent's estate from obviously the deceased ownership to whoever the heirs are going to be. Those heirs can either be predicated by California law or by whatever instrument that the deceased left behind, whether that's a trust or a will. In a perfect world, everybody would create a trust if they own real estate in California, because that certainly makes the transfer much, much easier.
How often do people not create the trust that you see?
Unfortunately, very often.
Really?
And that slows down the process considerably.
Why is that? Why do people not do the will, the trust? I just don't understand how, especially parents, right? You have kids, real estate. Why is this ignored?
You would think that they would certainly do that to make everything easier. And in fact, actually one of the most common tax mistakes that I see pertains to real estate transfers on death. Somebody will meet with a friend and the friend will say, oh, you don't have to pay $2,500, $5,000 to have a trust created. You can just put your kids on title to the property with you. They do that, and then when they pass away, yes, it does transfer. However, what happens is they get themselves killed with capital gains tax.
So there's a tax component of it as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Interesting.
So it does transfer, but having somebody who's very familiar with the real estate market and familiar with transfer of wealth on death is very important.
So what's your role with all of this, AJ?
We typically come in like with Ross, where he's got clients that have taken over the property and they need to sell it. We've got one right now that has 5 beneficiaries, and so it's a matter of trying to get them all together, get everything. We went power of attorney.
If there's not a will or a trust, you're leaving it up to the state of California, basically.
Exactly, and that's exactly what happened in this case. It was a probate matter, so
now your job is to sell this house on behalf of these other people?
Correct.
That I'm sure there's fighting at times, arguing?
There can be. Fortunately, in this case, there's not. But yeah, there certainly can be.
Yeah, absolutely, especially when there's 5.
Professionals, right?
Sure, yeah, and so we're coming in basically to represent them, make sure that all the needs are met on his side, the probate, and then also with the clients, doing everything needs to happen start to finish so the property gets sold, everyone makes their money, and then all the legal aspects are taken care of, which is Ross's specialty.
So, in parting here, I want to give some advice. What advice would you give on the legal side? What advice would you give on the real estate side when it comes to avoiding these issues in your future? What advice would you give?
Work with an attorney, work with an experienced real estate agent. Everything's going to transfer much more cost effectively and much easier.
Okay, so the professional. AJ, what piece of advice would you give on the real estate side?
I would say same thing. I mean, most people just aren't educated on what needs to happen or why it should go into a trust and why they need to have a will in place. So make sure that people that you work with are giving you good advice so that as you're purchasing the property, even if you're not buying it in the trust immediately, get it into a trust after closing. If you're taking out a loan, sometimes the lender's not going to lend to a trust, but someone that can understand, the process of let's purchase it, talk to Ross afterwards, get everything in line, put it into the trust, and then you're protected so that down the road, if something should happen, all of your family is, again, protected from capital gains and different tax implements.
Right.
And I'll just summarize it. If you don't have your arms really wrapped around this, reach out to these guys. If you don't have a will, a trust, if you own real estate, you have a family, I don't know if it's people avoid talking about death. Maybe is that it?
That can be part of it.
When I did mine, I felt empowered. It's kind of like your legacy. You're deciding what's going to happen. I don't know. I would rather be up to that decision than the state of California.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, you guys are the best in the business. I hope our audience can reach out to you. AJ, thank you for navigating the real estate market with us. As always, we'll be going out in the field with you next time on the show. Looking forward to that. More of the American Dream.